The Kalb Report is funded by a grant from the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., this is the Kalb Report with Marvin Kalb.
Welcome to the National Press Club and to another edition of the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and our guest tonight is Rupert Murdoch, and our subject, the making of a modern media mogul. About 15 years ago, a biographer of Rupert Murdoch described him as one of the most powerful men in the world. The communications revolution in which we now find ourselves is changing the world, everything about it, what we read, see, listen to, appreciate, everything from economics to politics to culture. Rupert Murdoch is now in the middle of all of that. His corporation, the News Corporation, owns and runs a movie company. You've heard of Avatar, I'm sure. Fox Television, featuring entertainment and sports. Fox News on cable, with ratings higher than any other cable operation. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, HarperCollins book publisher, and that's all just in the United States. A lot more overseas in England, Europe, and Asia. Rupert Murdoch is indeed a modern media mogul, and we are delighted, indeed honored, to have him as our guest today. Mr. Murdoch, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to start first with that quote, one of the most powerful men in the world. And that was 15 years ago. So we can imagine what you are today. How do you take to that kind of a description?
I don't let it get to me. I don't really believe it.
You don't believe it?
No.
Well, a lot of people do. Let me start with three quotes from people you know or knew of, and then let's talk about each one of them. The first is from an Australian clergyman, late 19th century, who believed that, and I quote, "A free press is probably the strongest foe of tyranny. No autocrat can tolerate the widespread dissemination among his people of a free discussion of his conduct." You remember?
No.
Your grandfather.
Was my grandfather?
Your grandfather.
Must be, yes.
Patrick Murdoch. And he seemed to have been, with that quote, a passionate fan of what we call the First Amendment.
Right.
An absolutist in a way. And I'm wondering what your own view would be. Do you share that kind of total commitment to the First Amendment?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think it's fundamental to this country and its strengths, and its lack of presence in other countries shows their weaknesses. We have a great advantage with it.
The second quote is from a newspaper publisher, early 20th century, English, who explained his success by saying, quote, "A newspaper is to be made to pay. Let it deal with what interests the mass of people. Let it give the public what it wants." Remember who said that?
Are you going to say my father or Northcliffe?
Lord Northcliffe.
Lord Northcliffe, it
Absolutely.
sounds like. Yes.
And Lord Northcliffe was the mentor of your father, who was a great journalist in his own right. Do you share that view?
Yes. Yes, I do believe that, but the public wants good ethical journalism, good factual journalism, but they also want to be entertained.
Well, it seems that what Lord Northcliffe was saying was that you give the public what it wants. And you'll remember that in a good part of the 20th century, there was a kind of philosophical argument among American journalists, going back to Walter Lippmann, that the American public certainly should have what it wants. But Lippmann also added that it ought to be given what it needs in a very complex society. Would you buy into both elements there? What it wants
absolutely. I think that media should provide debate on the great issues of the day with informed comment on both sides of every issue.
Mm-hmm. The third
that is an additional thing, but I think it's also part of the attraction of media.
But I think what Northcliffe was saying was that the most important thing is give them what they want. Lippmann was adding a whole new dimension to that, what they need. But you're buying into both, are you not?
Yeah, well, Northcliffe wasn't above expressing opinions in his papers. He was, of course, he was the founder of the Daily Mail, the first really popular paper in Britain.
When you say
the penny press, if you like.
The penny press in the American context, but tabloid is what you're saying.
Well, what we would call tabloid, well, I think tabloid's a misunderstood word in this country. It means differently. In Britain, Australia, it means a compact-sized paper. Mm-hmm. Tabloid, you mean here, is often thought to be really cheap, unreliable journalism. I don't think it was true of Northcliffe, but the Daily Mail was certainly full of human interest stories, which hadn't previously been reported.
Mm-hmm. Third quote is from a very modern Mogul. The quote is, "My past consists of a series of interlocking wars." Do you remember that quote?
No.
You said
me?
it.
I've got to say, it sounds like me. Yeah.
You said it.
Could describe me.
I was wondering what you meant by the interlocking wars. My past consists of a series of interlocking wars.
Well, I've had to battle my way up and be in very competitive situations, sometimes create competitive situations by starting new enterprises. We've been involved in newspaper wars, television wars, and all types of media wars, I guess. And I've enjoyed them. We've lost a few, but won enough still to be here.
But you're using the term wars, suggesting extreme competition, very ferocious competition.
Yes, particularly in the early days in Australia. Really ferocious. Not so much since.
What about in England?
Well, they were pretty sleepy there, If you went to work for 8 hours every day, you were ahead of the competition.
What about your dealing in England with trade unions?
Oh, yes, that was tougher. Everybody was fighting the trade unions, but the publishers would always meet, agree to fight them, and before they got back to their offices, be giving in. So, they deserved what they got. And the unions and the different crafts were all out of control, and the papers were missing editions and full of mistakes that couldn't be corrected in time. It was very tough going. And I waited until I thought I was big enough to take a strike and come back at the end of it, whether it would be a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I could come back at the end of it and the readers would still be there.
It is said
or
that
enough of them not to ruin the business.
But it's said that you broke the back of the trade union.
Yeah, that was a very tough, unpleasant fight.
And when it was over, did the unions continue to work?
No.
In your newspapers?
No.
No. They were union-free newspapers.
Yes, we have a staff association and that sort of thing, but that we deal with
and do you feel
on a friendly
that
basis.
Do you feel it was a better paper after the unions?
Oh, yes, we haven't missed an edition. And incidentally, since that date in 1986, I think, not one of our competitors has missed an edition to the unions because they learnt their lesson. And it was very, very interesting. I mean, that allowed, 20 years after America, it allowed computerization to come in. we give people, I think, better paid than anybody else there now as a result, but you know, we can change jobs for people, the manning scales are different, and people work harder. They're very happy, but they get good salaries, all of them, but they're extraordinarily automated.
I want to go back to the interlocking wars. Do you see, the reason I ask that question is that someone who works for you, Bill O'Reilly, sitting in this seat here a couple of years ago.
Really?
Well, yes, yes. Very good guest, very good, very interesting guest. But he was describing his relationship to the world almost in me against them terms. And I'm wondering if you see yourself in a conflict with the rest of the world, or do you see moments when you're in a state of tranquility?
Don't get much tranquility, but no, I'm not at war with the world. Bill likes to say, well, you know, he's a Long Island working class boy who's made good.
Yep.
I can't claim that privilege. But yes, I saw certainly that I was taking on the newspaper establishment in Australia because we had very little money, we were a very small company, and you had to buy those things that were failing and get them on their feet and fight. In Britain, it was fun there. I mean, perhaps it was part of my Australianism, wanted to take them on.
Take on the Brits.
To take on the English.
Fair enough.
And we won pretty well.
I want to ask you about your father, Keith Murdoch, who was a small media mogul, if there is such a thing in his day, but also an outstanding journalist. And he was the reporter who literally broke the story on the battle at Gallipoli in 1915 when the Turkish army killed literally thousands of Australian and New Zealand troops, and a lot of Turks died as well.
Not so many.
Not that many.
No, I mean, Australians and New Zealanders and Canadians and some Brits were just mown down in this ridiculous campaign.
Your father, to cover that, had a deal with the commanding officer who allowed him to go there and actually cover it, but there was an arrangement. And the arrangement was that Keith Murdoch would not write what he was seeing, but what he saw was so awful that he felt he had to write it. And of course, a British government and an English government fell, and a couple of generals lost their positions as a result. I'm asking you, do you feel that any reporter in doing his job, her job, should strike a deal with the government to cover the war?
I think there are times of national security and so on, yes. In fact, my father, that's not an accurate story totally. He was allowed in, there was strict censorship, and when he was on his way to London to take charge of, or to set up a bureau for half the newspapers in Australia to cover the war in Europe. And he had a small office in the Times, and he was typing away a letter to the Australian Prime Minister about it. And the editor of the Times walked in and said, "What are you doing, young man? And can I look at it?" He said, "Can I show this to the boss?" Meaning Northcliffe. He said, my father agreed. Northcliffe immediately took it down to the Prime Minister, Lloyd George, who made it a cabinet paper. And then there was a commission set up which recommended the closure of the campaign a couple of months later. And yes, indeed, they recalled the commander while the commission investigated it and supported all my father's allegations.
Absolutely. What I'm getting at is a broader issue. If you're involved in a war, and the United States is now involved in two wars, do you believe that your reporters, people who work for you, should make a deal with the government in order to cover a conflict, should allow themselves to be embedded with the forces?
Well, to be embedded with the forces is not accepting censorship in any way.
No.
I don't think it's compromising them.
No.
Now, I think these are different times now. But, you know, we had very strict censorship in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there were great debates going on between Admiral Halsey and General MacArthur and things like that, which never found their way into the press.
Right.
But Vietnam changed all that. And times are different. Now, we take it as a rule that journalists must be free to report everything. Unfortunately, in the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, particularly in Iraq, the journalists were holed up on a hotel in Baghdad most of the time because it was too dangerous for them to move out. And I don't think there was enough coverage.
But the idea of the embedded...
There were different phases of them being embedded with the...
But you don't have a problem with the embedding at this point?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it compromises the journalists.
Okay. One of your biographers, William Shawcross, in trying to explain what makes Rupert tick, said the following, quote, "His life appears as a series of psychic leaps in perpetual acceleration and endless acquisition, with no step far enough, no property, and adequate reward." Wow.
I think that's a pretty big overstatement. I mean, it is true. You know, when I was young and ambitious and smaller, I took risks. I bet the company a few times. Then not again until perhaps very closely the strike we took in London. That was betting. I think that's where most of our profits were coming from. And then when I started Sky Television as a sort of pirate operation, which was legal in Europe and unlicensed, not illegal, but unlicensed. And Mrs. Thatcher seemed to like the idea of someone competing with the BBC. And we started, and that nearly sent me broke. We were losing a fortune. And we had opposition, which did have a license, and they were losing twice as much money. Huh. And they finally came to us. But they had 3 times as much in reserve. Oh. And they finally came and said, let's merge the two into one. Huh. And now, there we are, B-Sky-B with 10 million customers.
Was that when your fortune, so to speak, turned around and went positive? What was the big moment?
It's had its ups and downs. I don't know about my fortune.
What was the big moment?
We don't look at that much. B-Sky-B was a great success, but we only earn 40% of it today, but we've had all our money back several times. No, I think, you know, things are, you know, you have your breaks and luck, and you do things which people think are crazy. Fox News was thought to be crazy, but there's no room for anyone but CNN. But, you know, when Ted Turner started CNN, people said there's no room for CNN. So, you know, here we are today with something worth $10 or $12 billion, which is the work of Roger Ailes, who's done it absolutely brilliantly.
Tell me, I'm curious, how do you get your news in the course of a day?
I spend more time than most people reading the newspapers. I try to read the Journal, I read the New York Post, I read...
Well, you own those two.
Yeah. So
what else do you read?
It's my responsibility to read them, because I'm going to be held responsible for them. I think that's fair.
Read the Times?
And I read a lot of the time. I go through it, and I stop at several places.
The Washington Post?
No, I don't read the Washington Post. I probably should, but I don't. I mean, very occasionally. But,
do you walk around with one of those BlackBerries and constantly checking on what's going on here? What's the market like?
No.
What's the developments in Iraq like?
No. But I have a double computer screen behind me, one with the WallStreetJournal.com and the other with the NewYorkTimes.com, and I'm comparing them.
Content. Big word. It's become even bigger in your own vocabulary recently. At a meeting you said, quote, "Content is not just king, it is the emperor of all things electronic. We're on the cusp of a digital dynasty from which our company and our shareholders will profit greatly." Let's put aside the money.
Put aside the second part. We'll come to that, all right?
No, but I want to talk about content. And I'd like to hear what your definition is, because in reviewing everything under your sway, I'm not absolutely clear what it is that you as the boss consider content. So help us out.
Well, it's what we print, it's the words. I hope it's ethical, strong journalism. It's television, everything from entertainment to news channels. And of course, we try to make better and better films. The last year, we've just made the all-time world record. Not many people would have taken that risk of spending nearly $400 million on a film.
But you've made almost $3 billion on it.
No, I wish. We brought in partners and so on this, but we've done very nicely. We're not complaining. No, it's taken $2.7 billion at the box office, but you get everything from 55% of the box office in this country for a film like that to 15% from China.
I understand.
Where it's state-controlled.
Right, but...
So we don't get anything like 2.9 billion or
no,
2.7
but is content then anything that you put out?
Absolutely. We consider that's what we produce, is content. Now, we get dragged into technical things sometimes that are necessary, and investments in technical, but we're not a technical company and we don't compete. We're not into making technical objects. We are all about words and pictures.
Good. But what I'm trying to understand, when you talk about content, I assume you mean substantive content.
Indeed.
All right. So is Avatar the same as an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, both being defined as content?
They're both content, absolutely. But
they're quite different.
They're very different, yes.
Right. And that...
But you can apply, and it's a question of quality for both. I mean, let me just tell you how I got into the film business. I got a license for a television station in Adelaide after I'd been there 3 or 4 years. They were just issuing the first television licenses. And I found pretty quickly that in Adelaide, you really couldn't afford to make a lot of programs. You had to take what was bought by the stations in Sydney and Melbourne and be part of a big network. And I chafed at that until we could finally put together a network. But that took many years. We had to wait for others to fail and get in. And then I found that the cheapest way to run, not the cheapest way, the only profitable way to run was to take quite a lot of American content. And the studios said, if you want to buy from us, you buy everything we make. And so, which we fought unsuccessfully. And so I had at the back of my mind, I wanted to get to where it all started. So when it became possible, I started to buy 20th Century Fox. I jumped at it. Mm-hmm. And it was the last reasonable deal in the exchange of I think we paid a net $300 million for it. The next one sold for $4 billion.
Forgive me, but I want to go back to content because I'm obviously missing something. For you, content, substantive content, can be anything from the Avatar movie to Hannity at 9 o'clock on Fox, sounding off with his own opinions, Those opinions you put into substantive content, into that category.
Yeah, I think Hannity is very good. I think he's extremely sincere, open, Catholic, conservative, traditionally. He's a very nice man, and he has a huge audience, and that's fine. But no one says it's anything other than comment. That is comment from one man.
Right, so that to understand the content, what it is that Fox Television puts out, and let me quickly say, I do occasional commentary for Fox, let that be on the record. I want to understand, though, that there appears to be two Foxes. There's a Fox in the evening with highly opinionated anchors. And then there's Fox News during the day, which is pretty much what it would be in almost any other network.
No, we think it's different. I think that's our strength.
No, but
because we have both sides.
You have?
Both sides.
You have both sides of an issue?
Yes, in our news shows, on politics or whatever, we have, you know, Democrats and Republicans and libertarians, whatever.
But the other networks have
well, I think they just
both sides as well.
They tend to be Democrats.
They tend to be Democrats.
Yeah, come on, let's be honest about it.
No, but I mean, is that a bad thing to be a Democrat?
No, but we're not Republicans.
Oh, you're not a Republican?
No.
You're a conservative?
No, I might be a radical.
What are you?
Somewhere radical, I would say.
You're a radical?
Yeah, I'm not frightened of change.
But why is it that so much of your radical beliefs are on one side of the political spectrum?
Well, I'm not saying I agree with Mr. Hannity. For that, I don't know, or Bill O'Reilly or whoever.
Or Glenn Beck. Or Sarah Palin, for example. She is now one of your commentators.
Yes, I think, yeah, she's
well, I mean,
occasionally.
Do you consider her a journalist?
No.
So why is she
nor would she pretend to be one.
Correct. She's a politician.
But she can, yes, but we have a lot of politicians.
No, but you're putting her into a journalistic environment, putting a mantle of journalism on her. Are you not?
No. Well, it's what you call a commentator. But if something big happens, we might go to a Democrat and then go to Sarah Palin or whatever. I don't know how often Roger uses Sarah Palin. I know whenever he does, the ratings leap.
So that's a good thing. I mean, if the ratings go up...
We're not averse to high ratings.
Let me ask you about other definitional issues. For example, tell the story. In April 1945, Ed Murrow, then a reporter based in London for CBS, visited the Buchenwald concentration camp right after it was opened. He did not go back to his hotel room and write an immediate broadcast. He was so overwhelmed by the horror that he saw that he spent 3 days thinking about it before he actually wrote it. When he did write it, it became one of the classics in American broadcasting history. Your own sense of that, would you think that was good journalism to wait 3 days before you share with your public that which you experienced, this incredible experience? How would you put it?
Yes, I don't know that you could do it today because you would have had your competitors with you.
Absolutely.
Racing out to tell the story. Clearly, it can lead to classical work. But, you know, the race to be first can lead to corners being cut, and we have to be careful about that. And that's where editing comes in.
Do you feel
But I think if it was Buchenwald and it was just discovered, and the three great networks all discovered it at the same moment, I would imagine they would have raced to get on the air.
Absolutely. And so today, given the very nature of our journalism and competition, that kind of Murrow-type reporting would not fit in. It would not be acceptable.
Well, I think as the first breaking of the news, no, it would not be possible. But it's still possible to make a major statement about it or a major report. Oh, absolutely.
And deep down, you don't have a problem with a reporter going beyond the facts, ma'am, and providing, as well as the facts, his or her own interpretation, beliefs, where political views would enter the telling of a story.
Well, it's got to be very clear, I think, that the writer's it's got to be clear that he is writing his opinion. But of course, some things like that, you can't avoid subjective reporting.
I want to take just a moment now to tell our radio and television audiences that this is the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and we're here talking with Rupert Murdoch. Sir, you have said, quote, "The old business model based mainly on advertising is dead." In the new business model, we will be charging consumers for the news we provide on our internet sites. There have been critics who say that model won't fly. You argue that it will, in fact, fly. So, again, help me understand some of this. When you took over the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago, the Journal was charging for the information that it provided online. When you came in, you said, stop that. No more charging. It's going to be free. Now you have changed your mind, clearly. What made you change your mind? Where are you now?
Well, I don't know that I said I would do that. I was certainly musing about it before we walked in, and I listened to the executives and their case they made and looked at the revenue involved and the success of it. I mean, we have had all along about 1 million people paying for wallstreetjournal.com. Some also buy the paper, and they use it to keep up to date throughout the day on breaking news, markets and so forth, and others only rely on it. I think about 400,000. And we're very happy with that. And we're going to keep that, and we're going to extend it to the Times in London and to any other papers we have.
So that all of your papers...
And we're going to stop people like Google or Microsoft or whoever from taking our stories for nothing.
And you can do that, technically,
yeah, there's a law
saying.
of copyright, yes.
By copyright.
You just, and they recognize it. You just, if you call them up, you hardly need to write them a letter.
Have you already done that?
No, because we haven't. Oh, yes, absolutely. As far as the Wall Street, WSJ.com, that's always been the rule. They don't touch that.
As well as the papers that you have.
The paper itself, they do. And they will be stopping that very shortly.
Be stopping what exactly?
Well, if you go to Google News and you see stories and it says Wall Street Journal, and you tap on it and you suddenly get the page or the story as in the Wall Street Journal. And it's for free.
Right.
And they take it for nothing, and then they've got this very clever business model, which is, and they've invented almost a new type of advertising, search advertising. And so if they just pour out tens of millions of words a day, one way or another, they have key words in there which tie to advertising beside it, just textual advertising, and it's produced a river of gold. But those words are being taken from, mostly, from the newspapers. And I think they ought to stop it. The newspapers ought to stand up and let them do their own reporting or whatever.
So in an ideal world, Google and the others will pay if they want to take anything from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post or any other paper?
Yes.
They are not doing that as yet.
No. No.
But you intend for that to happen.
I don't think we'll charge them. They just will say no. Look, we'll be very happy if they just publish our headline and maybe a sentence or two, and that's it. And, you know, followed by a subscription form for the journal. And that brings you so-called traffic to your site.
Understand.
And then you tell advertisers how much traffic you've had.
But Mr. Murdoch,
it's a little fictional.
According to a recent survey, 16% of the people who get their news on the internet, on the various websites, say that they are prepared to pay for it. Mm-hmm. But if my arithmetic is right, that's 84% who get their news from the websites say they're not going to pay for it. What does that do for you, if that's true?
I think when they've got nowhere else to go, they'll start paying, and if it's reasonable, no one's going to ask for a lot of money. I mean, we're now selling an electronic edition of the whole journal for $3.99 a week, which is a lot cheaper than buying it at a newsstand. It's about the same as the average subscription, a bit less. But, you know, there's no paper involved, there's no print, no trucks.
I know, but I'm surprised
I don't like, as far as I'm concerned, I like what we've done, but, you know, I'm old. I like the tactile experience of the newspaper.
But you're also an awfully good businessman, and you are somebody who's in effect saying that you support an operation, a new technological operation, that may very well be the end of the printed newspaper.
I think it'll take a long time, but it may. But it doesn't destroy the traditional newspaper. It just comes in a different form.
Yeah, but as you said, you don't have that thing that you can pick up with your Rice Krispies.
Right, but the fact is that, you know, it's very hard in this country and in some other countries to find people under the age of 30 who ever buy a newspaper.
Wow.
I don't know how many people at George Washington University students ever read one.
100% buy the newspaper. 100%.
No, they don't.
No, I think you're right, they do not.
They pick up a little bit on television, a bit here, a bit there.
Tell me, you've implied and perhaps even stated outright that you're in a pretty tough competition right now with the New York Times.
Not really.
And that you would not lose a moment of sleep if the Times went under, and that you consider the Times too liberal, and you'd like to do away with it. Now, take me apart on that.
That's not true. I've got great respect for the Times, except it does have very clearly an agenda, and you can see it in the way they choose their stories. The agenda what they put on page one. I think anything Mr. Obama wants.
Anything that Obama wants?
Well, you can see it, and you can see it, and the White House pays off by feeding them stories and so on. This morning you could see it. Very good story, which we would have liked. But there you are. That's okay. I think people know where they are with it. Sometimes a lot of people get irritated for the Times. Certainly in New York, there's a very big Jewish society who feels that it's far too critical of Israel. The Times certainly has a cutting edge. But it has a lot of very good work in it, there's no doubt about it. Now, we think it's formidable, but there's no harm in being an alternative. They sell in New York. I mean, remember, we're still looked upon as a financial paper, although we've broadened it enormously. But they sell about 2 to 1 against us in New York, about 480,000 to our 250 in rough terms. In the rest of the country, we sell about 3 times as many as they do. We are really, well, you've got to put USA Today somewhere in here, the only national newspaper. It's only the leading national newspaper.
How do you get on with Mr. Sulzberger, the publisher of the Times?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see him much, and we don't do a lot of it, but fine.
What about the story in
he doesn't like me, I don't think.
in the Wall Street Journal a weekend ago that seemed to compare him to effeminate?
That's nonsense.
That was nonsense. Not to be
There was
taken
a whole group
seriously.
of pictures, and there was stories and pictures that have been changed. Someone had written a book about men with slightly effeminate-shaped faces were more attractive to women these days.
Yeah.
And so on. And there was a montage of faces. And I never saw it. I never noticed it.
He did.
And then someone, I don't know. I think 99.9% of the readers didn't notice it until someone did, and then it got written about on blogs and so on. And it was just the bottom of his face. And I know who did it, and it was done as a joke. And, you should have a life. I mean, come on.
So you're quite happy with the competition with the Times. You don't want to really do it in.
No, but, we fight for every inch of advertising and of a type. And when we start our own big New York edition in 3 weeks, we'll be fighting for some of their other advertising, that's to say from the big department stores and so on. But in national advertising, people are trying to reach the whole country, what's called business-to-business advertising. We go right after it, and we're doing very well. I mean, we are well up on a year ago, whereas they're still down. And that goes for newspapers across the country. We are unique, I think, in having increased our advertising in the last year. But we're comparing with some pretty terrible times. But others haven't crawled out of that yet. But, just let me say one thing. Newspapers, on the whole, get out of New York for a minute. They're semi-monopolies, and they've lived on all the classified advertising, real estate, job advertising, and so on. We've just been through a recession when a lot of it has just disappeared, but at the same time, it's being attacked all the time by different sites on the internet.
Sure.
In a way that apparently is effective. Now, the Wall Street Journal never had that body of advertising to lose. So, in a sense, we were lucky about that.
You have said, I'm not a knee-jerk conservative. That's the way you've described yourself. And I am, you said before, radical. And I'm not quite sure I know what you mean by that. But
Well, I think sometimes, strong change can be good.
strong change from what to where?
Well, if we think something is bad,
Make it good.
make it good.
Well, what is bad now?
And
that
you
I've-
often have to, go through a lot of vested interests, things like that.
Let me tick off a couple of names. Give me a quick Rupert Murdoch editorial on each one. Okay, like President Obama.
Well, I'm like the rest of the country. I hope he does well. We've been critical. I think he's missing a great opportunity for a wonderful legacy by not tackling the education system in this country. He's made very good speeches about it, but he's not really faced the unions, who are his supporters.
Would you support him if he moved in that direction?
Absolutely.
Good.
Very strongly. I think what he has said in speeches that he'd like to see, he's been absolutely right. Merit pay for teachers, less tenure, open go for charter schools, I think that's absolutely what's needed. We are criminal in this country in that we're turning out a new generation of people worse educated than their parents. And I think, you know, it's going to have long-term effects that are very serious.
What about...
And he said that himself.
Yes, yes. John McCain?
I find him personally likable. He's sometimes a little hard to read. You wonder which side of the bed he got out of that morning. But he's, you know, obviously a great patriot. And, you know, any man who's been through what he's been through, absolutely, you can make a lot of excuses for.
You strike me as someone who has one foot in today and one foot in tomorrow. And I'd like to ask your opinion about the internet, the web. Where do you think it's going? Is that really an indicator of the future? I mean, I noticed that you've got your new iPad sitting there.
Yes, I think that the internet is a fantastic invention. I think it's in its early stages of development through broadband and so on, what you call it, the internet, medical services, education, in a lot of areas, and connecting people up and informing people. But, you know, we worry about newspapers. And can I talk about this now for a minute?
Go right ahead.
And young people not going to them and so on. And the advertising base being eroded. So, and I think, you know, I've got a glimpse of the future this last weekend with the Apple iPad. It is a wonderful thing. It's not all new invention, but it's brought together all forms of media, music, books, newspapers, whatever, plus a lot of other things, games and so on.
Well, here we can see...
Now, that's the Wall Street site, which we're very proud of, and everybody says it's the best newspaper site at the moment. I mean, others may pass it, but...
Well, but it's a good illustration of what it is that we're moving toward.
You see, we can go back for 7 days, go back around. If you've missed an article or someone's told you you ought to see something that was in, you know, the paper last Saturday or last Friday or something, you can find it. The whole papers are stored in memory disks in this beautiful looking machine, all right? You can play games with it. Here we are, that's the side. And then we update it, the front page at least, every half hour through the day. So if something big happens, it's there. And we have every word of the Wall Street Journal is there. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to find. You can pick the stories you want to read, and you can touch a picture, and it becomes a video. So you actually see
right now,
illustrated the story above with a moving picture rather than just a still picture. So it's an advancement.
It's interesting. Do you know now of the people who own this particular instrument, how many of them would turn to the Wall Street Journal and find out what the Journal site has? Do we know that as
well?
Yet?
We know absolutely that, I don't know the exact number, but tens of thousands over the weekend of the 300,000 who bought it did click on the Wall Street Journal site and visit it. Mm-hmm. Now, what we're doing with it is anybody who today buys the Journal or WSJ.com at the full price can have it for free. If you would like it and you don't read the Journal, then it's nearly $4 a week, which is very cheap. And we hope to expand our circulation with it. And you know, if there's going to be a transition to this over the long term, it'll have to be managed very, very carefully.
If there's to be that transition.
Yes, if you say, you know, well, it's the end of the tactile newspaper.
But is that what you think? I'm trying to get your judgment.
No, I don't know. I just don't know.
I mean, 10 or 20 years from now...
This is going to be improved on by Apple. They'll have 8 or 9 competitors within 12 months in the electronic industry.
Right.
And there's going to be tens of millions of this sort of thing sold all over the world.
So what you're saying is that that is, in effect, your vision of the future of newspapers. And what I'm trying to understand is...
I think it's a possibility which I have to provide for. And it may be the saving of newspapers because it'll be...
How the saving?
Well, you don't have the costs of paper, ink, printing,
No,
trucks.
but that's the end of the newspaper that you pick up.
That's when you come to the end of the road, yes.
Right.
But you'll have... If you have less newspapers and more of these, that's okay. You're going to have... It'll be more economic. It may well be, you know, the saving of the newspaper industry. Now, there'll be a lot of things available there, what they call apps or applications, and a lot of them will just be blogs and irresponsible stuff. What we believe that if you have, you know, a great name and trust from your readers and you keep earning it every day,
brand,
people will come to you. So, yes, to be associated with your brand.
And if you maintain that quality brand, that will draw people, that will attract people to that same brand on the internet.
Yes, yes.
And even if the cost is the end of newspapers as we know it, that, in your mind, appears to be where it is that we may be going.
Well, it's better than them going out of business altogether.
And a lot of them are.
And a lot of them are finding it very hard at the moment.
Mr. Murdoch, you do an awful lot of traveling around the world, and if the 20th century was the American century, what country do you think is going to be called the country of the 21st century?
I think America, again, at least the first half of it. I don't pretend to be a seer about how far you can look. But if we've got to put a few things right. We've got to get our immigration right. We've got to drain the brains out of other countries who want to come here, and we're not. All we do is teach them and give them a ticket home. That's got to change. We have a higher reproduction rate than other countries. We've got a lot of things going for us in the long term, and we have this. I think traditional, it's almost in our DNA to be entrepreneurial, to be creative, and to attract creative people. We've got no monopoly in that, but I think we're going to be, we're going to be very strong in the long term. We'll have some bumps on the way. We're just coming out of a very serious bump. I think I'm a little bit bearish we could have another bump quite soon. But if you go beyond that.
In your judgment, what country today is the most progressive in terms of economic and technological advance?
This country? In high tech, not on the same scale, but it's being challenged to some extent by Israel, which got an explosion of high-tech industries and growth in its GDP. And again, very clever immigrants from all over the world.
Fascinating. A concluding question.
But I would say Europe, no.
China, India?
No, I think China has a real problem until it frees itself up. I've just been reading a book called The Party, a recent book, and how it's not about capitalism or communism, it's about control. Mm-hmm. And until those controls come off and it gets freed up and debate and creativity, of which they're quite capable, gets started. And I think that's a long way away.
We've got about a minute to go, and I just want to ask you this concluding question. In this room, which is so crowded, as you can see, there are many journalism students, and there may be among them someone who would love to be a media mogul, just like Rupert Murdoch.
Good.
What advice would you give to that person?
Well, choose the area you want to be in, and get some experience, get some training, come to us, or a local television station or a local newspaper, get some real grounding, and then, if you still feel like it and are prepared to take a risk with whatever you've managed to save or raise or get from friends, buy something and then see if you make a success, build on it.
But build on the beginning, which would be as a reporter, as a journalist, as opposed to going into the management.
Absolutely.
Why? Why the reporter is so important?
Well, you've got to understand. I mean, if you don't produce, something that people want to buy, you can have all the managers in the world. The editor is the most important person in the building.
And the reporter who actually goes out and does the story.
Oh, yes, but it's the editor who appoints him and finds him and trains him or whatever.
I have to tell you that our time is up. We have faced what is often called the tyranny of the clock. And I want very much to thank our audience, which has been just terrific, wonderful. But most especially, I want to thank Rupert Murdoch for taking the time to be with us, for answering our questions, and for sharing all of those insights accumulated over many, many years. But that's it for now. I'm Marvin Kalb, and as Ed Murrow used to say, good night and good luck. Okay, now we've got 20 minutes when you can ask questions. And all I would ask you to do, I can see right here and there. I beg of you, ask a question, don't make a speech. Identify yourself and ask Mr. Murdoch, and that will be fine. We'll start right over here, please.
Hi, Mr. Murdoch. My name's Ari Rabenhoft. I'm from a group called Media Matters. In the week leading up to last year's Tea Party, Fox News aired 73 in-show promotions. For the events, your business network host, David Assman, told viewers they needed to visit Tea Party.
We're missing some of what you're saying.
Sorry,
Could you speak into the microphone and speak a little more slowly, please?
Your business network host, David Assman, told viewers they needed to visit the Tea Party website to buy merchandise, and your network had graphics saying Fox Day Tea Parties. Is it appropriate for a news network to engage in that much politics?
No, I don't think we should be supporting the Tea Party or any other party. But I'd like to investigate what you're saying before I condemn anyone.
Okay, on this side, please.
Hello, Mr. Murdoch. I'm a student at the George Washington University. It's been said that you like to view yourself as a modern-day Hearst, by which it's meant a
modern which?
A modern-day Hearst, by which it's meant a true newspaper man. I'm wondering how much of your day is spent reading your newspapers and dealing with your newspapers as compared to the movie business and the TV business.
Oh, at least half on the newspapers. But of course, unfortunately, being chief executive of a big company, one has to deal with a lot of issues in a lot of areas, which you try to pass down to other people, but you're still there and still responsible. So it's not just reading newspapers or criticizing them or talking to editors.
But you must really love newspapers, because you own the New York Post, and consistently, year after year, it loses money.
Right.
So you're laying out that extra money for them to pursue. So that's kind of your, what, a hobby?
No, that's not at all. We think it does a lot of good. We think we fight a lot of good causes. But, if newspapers are going to shrink in New York, we want to be the last one standing.
Yes, please.
I'm Gary Arlen from Arlen Communications in Bethesda. I had the pleasure of sitting next to you at the All Things Digital conference last year and was fascinated by your response as Mark Zuckerberg and others from Facebook and others talked about user-generated content. Can you talk a little bit about how you think consumer-generated content plays into this new media world we're moving into?
No, I think we ought to look at it. We certainly encourage interactivity with our readers and them writing to us and publishing a lot of it. But before we want to see how they write, and we want to know them before we'd hire them and say, look, we'll trust you with the story.
Okay.
These social networks are an interesting phenomenon, but I don't think they're changing the world.
Yes, please.
Hi, Mr. Murdoch. Thank you for doing this. My name is Matt Negrin. I'm a reporter with Politico, but I'm not reporting on this event. I was wondering what your prediction is for the New York Times paywall for their website, which is going to go into effect next year.
I don't know. I've spoken to them. They don't seem to be able to make up their minds. They'll have opposition internally from some of their journalists, particularly their columnists, who are very jealous of their wider audience. But I think to really make it work, they've got to put a paywall up. And you'll find, I think most newspapers in this country are going to be putting up a paywall. Now, how high does it go? Does it allow them to have the first couple of paragraphs or certain feature articles? We'll see. I mean, we're experimenting with that ourselves. Not everything in the journal has a paywall around it. But, for instance, the personal journal doesn't. But most of the finance does, and the front section does.
Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Timothy White, and I'm with the Washington Center for Internships and Academic Seminars. I was just wondering if you would be willing to share your definition of ethical journalism with us, sir.
Yeah, honest. I think, the facts have got to be told honestly and investigated properly. It's not to say that mistakes don't get made, but that's, to be ethical, you have to consciously try to get to the truth of the matter.
Hi, Mr.
Please.
Murdoch. My name is Jason Millman. I'm an editor with Thompson Publishing Group in Washington, D.C. And I want to ask you about, you mentioned that there are Democrats as well as Republicans on Fox News. I was wondering if you meant Democrats employed by Fox News, and if so, who would that be?
I wish I could tell you a couple of names, but they're certainly there. If Roger was here, he could certainly spin them out very quickly. I think probably every night, Greta Van Susteren is certainly close to the Democratic Party. She doesn't do many political stories. She's just a great journalist who goes after any story she can get. But people who have been involved in democratic politics and so on, yeah, we have people. I'm trying to think of the name of the lady in California who's been with us from day one, who we use a lot. You're right, I'm sorry. I apologize to her for not knowing.
Okay, yes, please.
My name is Catherine Gildenstedt. I'm a reporter from Denmark, of all places. Thank you for taking my question. You touched on that the technical side is not your focus, but what are your thoughts about innovating content, formats, interaction with users?
Well, I think technology is a great use and a great help, and we should be watching it all the time and ready to use it any way that can help us, but only to improve the content. I mean, without the content, all these things are nothing.
Please.
Sorry. My name is Nathan Martin with the Washington Post-Express. I'm not reporting for them, obviously. But Mr. Murdoch, you talked a little about the difference between commentary and reporting, and as young journalists prepare to go out into the workforce, that you would encourage them to go out and actually report on stories rather than going into management. We're in an increasingly commentary world where people blog things. What would you tell someone who's looking at trying to actually report rather than just comment and regurgitate other news stories?
I'd encourage them. That's what we want. We want, we want the facts. If they become great experts later on and we think they've got the wisdom, okay, they can have a column. They can go on the opinion pages.
Please.
Thank you for your time today. My name is Troy Pell. I'm from outside of Dallas. And one of the mediums of journalism that's also, quote unquote, dying is the evening news telecast. What would you do to fix it and get it into the 21st century and to make it viable once again?
I don't know. Better minds than mine are working at that. There's so much other news. The fact is, you've got the 24-hour news services, but I think the real problem for them is that the local television stations, a lot of which the big networks own, have pretty good news services from 6 to 6:30 or from 5 till 6, which mixes the big international news, the big national news, with the real local news. And, people feel that they've heard all the news by the time, and they love their local news. Of course, they want to know everything from what's happening to what the weather's going to be tomorrow. And it's, I think that's all there is to it. And I think it's very hard for the national news services to be a purely national one to come right after that. And I think you've seen them become more and more feature-ish, if I may say so. Less hard news, more stories that are a bit off the news. Interesting, but with all three of them there, it's very interesting. I mean, in different parts of the country, how they do. In New York or the East Coast, they still get reasonable audiences. In California, many days, none of them achieve 1% of the audience. But maybe that's California.
Well, I saw recently that the 3 evening newscasts still get 24 million households, which is a lot. It still is a lot. Yes, please.
Mr. Murdoch, my name is David Earl. I'm a grad student at George Washington. And in the event of a major news event, something that's breaking, is your priority to best inform the viewer on Fox News, for example, with your best journalist, or would you prefer to generate the best ratings and bring forth your best commentator, such as a Sarah Palin versus your top journalist?
No, if you do the best job reporting those facts, we'll get the best ratings. Don't worry about that. Up until 4 or 5 years ago, if something very big happened, people turned to CNN. Not from us, but they came in to watch news. They'd automatically go to CNN. They're now automatically going to Fox. Big news events, Fox adds more to its audience than does CNN, and because they trust it.
Hi, my name is Sloan Dickey. I attend the George Washington University. About halfway through your discussion, you said that the New York Times sets a liberal agenda, but there has been a lot of criticism from the White House and other news organizations that Fox News sets a very conservative agenda. Do you believe that Fox News sets any kind of agenda, and if so, what do you think that is?
No, I think, let's be honest about it. I think that, sure, there's a lot of conservative commentary there, but there's not conservative angling of the news. And it was interesting when they made a move against us at the White House, all the other networks immediately came to our defense. That you can't do that. And they don't like it that we carry criticism. And no politician likes to be criticized. and they grow paranoid, and, you know, that's life.
But what about the time that President Bush was in office? I don't believe that the president felt that the White House was in a war with Fox. They were quite happy with what they were getting.
They got criticized pretty hard quite a few times.
Really?
You bet. Bill O'Reilly, for one, went after the president many times.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Mastis.
Because he wouldn't appear on his show, that was the reason, I think.
My name's Lindsay Mastis. I'm one of the one-man band reporters for CBS affiliate WUSA here in Washington. I'm not reporting. But I wanted to know, in this country, journalists are taught not to have an opinion, not to sign petitions. Oftentimes it's in our contracts that we're not allowed to sign petitions. And this, of course, is the age of blogging. Do you believe that it's time for journalists to have their own opinions and to be forthcoming with those?
Oh, absolutely. But if they only write opinion in the media that they have access to or that employs them, then I think they're less valuable. But should a journalist have opinions? Of course. They're all citizens. Do they vote? Of course. There's nothing wrong with that. But how they do their job has got everything to do with it.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Nick Taxiarho. Got out of the Graduate School of Political Management this past December. And I wanted to ask you a question about a show that appeared on Fox News very briefly a couple years back called the Half-Hour News Hour. Lasted very briefly. And maybe this is the question that Mr. Ailes would be, more knowledgeable about answering, but it failed within a season. And I'm just wondering, compared to a Colbert Report or the Daily Show, is there any chance that a satirical, politically charged show could last on something like a Fox News?
Well, I would hope it would. I think there's room for, a fun hour or half hour of satire where you send up everybody. But I don't remember that show, I'm sorry. But obviously we didn't do it very well.
Yes, please.
Hello, Mr. Murdoch. My name is Anton Gelman. I run a Free World Pulse, which is a new media startup. And actually, we talk a lot about UGC journalism and video coming from the internet, et cetera. But we don't generally mention the amount of high quality and really freelance video that's emerging from all around the world. Do you have an opinion on all the real high quality and professional content that's being generated?
You mean there's a lot of high quality material appearing outside the main media?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know how much, but I don't deny that, and I think we should be watching for it and going out and finding those people and trying to employ them.
You don't plan to leverage that content in your networks? Do you plan to bring it in from around the world into your kind of the network space?
Mm-hmm. Do you plan to bring that into your own network, all of the outside groups?
Well, I don't know about the groups, but yeah, where there's good work to be had, we will certainly, we would like to accommodate it.
We've only got time for maybe 2 more questions, so go ahead briefly.
Hi, my name is...
We're desperate for good shows and desperate for good content. Look at the entertainment networks. We're #1 and have been for 4 years, but, we depend really on 1 or 2 shows. And the other networks are the same. If someone comes with a great idea and a great show, we go for it like as fast as we can.
Hi, my name is Courtney Thompson, and I'm from the DC area, and I have a truly difficult question for you. What is your favorite non-news television program? Do you watch television?
Yeah. Well, I'm a great admirer of House. It happens to be on Fox, but I think it's pretty good.
Excellent, thank you.
And we don't make it, unfortunately. And there's a great new show on FX called Justified. I don't know who's seen it. It's only a couple of episodes, but it's
last
recommended.
question.
My name is Martin Mentz. I'm a senior advisor to NeimanWatchdog.org. I'd like to ask you whether Fox News or the New York Post ever investigates corporate misdeeds. As an example, Merck didn't test Vioxx, the painkiller, for heart risks, and some 50,000 heart attacks followed after marketing.
Well, I don't remember us investigating that, but we reported on any other investigation. But do we have reporters investigating corporations? Absolutely. Look at our business pages.
Okay, friends and neighbors, as they say, the time is up, and thank you all very much for being here, and thank you, Mr. Murdoch, once again.
Oh,